Good morning and welcome to Friday Coffee Meetup. I'm Christy Connor, your host. Friday Coffee Meetup is the largest active innovation, entrepreneurial, and tech meetup in Los Angeles, California. We are traditionally an in-person meetup, but we are virtual due to the current home restrictions from COVID. We are based in Pasadena, but we are so grateful to be able to connect with our members around the world during this challenging time. We're so grateful for you and for being here with us today. We have some information over in the chat window that you can take a look. We have a podcast and YouTube channel that you can go back and hear our amazing speakers. So if you're ever feeling like learning something new, go ahead and check those out. We are live streaming today from Zoom for Friday Coffee Meetup. So this is our first time doing this, so be gentle, folks. Our Q&A will happen today via the Zoom, via the Q&A panel. So although we have the chat window, it is unmoderated. You can put your comments there and chat with one another, but your questions need to go into the Q&A panel, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. We've also put in some information into the chat panel about our speaker today, Eric Paul Rose, who I will get to introducing to in a minute. And as well, we are about building community and building jobs. So if you have any jobs that you are hiring for, please go ahead and add those into the chat window as well. Although you are seeing my face today, there's actually a whole host of people behind me that make this happen each week. Show you their faces. So these are our co-organizers. They do things from helping us with logistics and setting up speakers to our YouTube and podcast channel to helping within our community and building community. So we are so grateful for them. We are also sponsored by Echo Factory, who helps us out each week to make this happen. Today, I'm excited to introduce to you Eric Paul Rose. He is the founder and president of Pinnacle Product Innovation, and he's going to speak to us about 3 keys to successful products. In doing that, he's going to delve into the 4 Ps around marketing, price, product, promotion, and place. He's also going to talk to us about some technical feasibility and protectability. With that, please join me in welcoming Eric. Eric, it's lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Christy, and it's my first time doing LinkedIn Live, so I look forward to hearing how that works out today. With that, I'm going to flip over to share screen and share my presentation with everybody today.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And let's see how that flies. And Christy, is that coming across well? Okay, we'll get started. It's my pleasure. Thank you. It's my pleasure to share with you today a system that I've developed over a number of years that I teach my clients and my students. We'll talk a little more about my background in a moment, but I call this system 3 Keys to Successful New Products. And what this is a framework for new product innovation. I find many entrepreneurs are doing so many different things at once. Sometimes it's hard to wrap your arms around what you should be doing when. And this will give you some clues as to how to manage this product innovation process, particularly if you're involved in hardware product development, which is a breadth of my experience. A little bit about myself. I am a product innovation and management consultant. My work moves from opportunity, in other words, identifying opportunities in the market, through product development, manufacturing, sourcing, and production launch. I am also an inventor with over 65 patents granted or pending worldwide. I have been a product innovation educator for over 10 years now. I'm currently an entrepreneur in residence at Cal State Northridge, have taught in the entrepreneurship program at Loyola Marymount University, in the MBA program at Pepperdine University, as well as Rice's MBA online last year. I have over 35 years of product development and manufacturing experience. In fact, this is my 40th year of providing professional expertise in product development and manufacturing, particularly in the Southern California area. Companies that I've worked with include Mattel Toys, in the PPE industry, which is very popular right now, a company in Culver City, Moldex. Started my career with American Hospital Supply, now Baxter, an electronics company doing infrared and radio frequency remote controls and other tech products, Interlink Electronics, and in the durable medical equipment industry, Sunrise Medical. But I like to say I've done toys to technology, toilets, pet products, and more. This is the system, and this is the order in which I believe the system should be followed and how we will discuss the system of this framework today. And basically it goes like this. First and foremost, marketability, which addresses the business model, the opportunity and the anguish in the market, the competitive environment, the go-to-market strategy, margins in the channel, and much more. Technical feasibility. Can the product that you want to offer the market be designed, developed, and in my case with hardware, manufactured at a cost low enough where everyone can make the expected margins in the channel of distribution? And then lastly, protectability. And again, we'll talk more about all these, but generally speaking, protectability is about creating a blanket of intellectual property. And I recommend that these three keys be followed in this order. And again, we'll speak more of this. So getting started, key number one, marketability. When looking at opportunities for new products, it's important to understand what needs and anguish are going on in the market. I call it what's wrong with the world today. Look at the STEP trends, short for societal, technological, economic, and political trends. And certainly since March of this year, there's been a lot of those. What's going on in the world in terms of competitive environment? Where have competitive and substitute products been, and where do you see them going to? And then, of course, if you have a vision, a hypothesis for your offer being product and or service, product being hardware and or software, what is your unique value proposition, and how do you plan to differentiate the offer that you're going to be bringing to market? This sets the stage for an understanding of marketability. And without spending a ton of time here today, but we certainly can address these more if there are questions later, the 4 Ps, the fundamental marketing mix of product. What is the product? What are the feature set? What are the must-haves and nice-to-haves within the product? Place. What is the distribution, the channel of distribution, and all the logistics around it? Promotion. How will the product be promoted and advertised? And price. What is your pricing strategy, and how do you map your offer and price against what else is out there in the world? I want to tell a little story about when I was at Mattel, a project that looked at trends and identified then a new product opportunity based upon a technological trend. The product on the left is known as See and Say, and that little arrow in the middle would spin when you pull the crank lever in yellow on the right, and when it spun, let's say it would land on the cow, and the little record player, literally a record player with a needle in there playing the record, would say, you know, the farmer says the cow makes a moo noise. And so that product, the materials cost and the labor cost, labor out of our Tijuana factory, continued to go up and up and up. And what we found was embedded ultimately in the product we launched on the right, technology that was coming down in cost was a digital voice answering chip. So if you've got an answering machine at home, chances are that that product has a digital chip in there that records your message and records the people who are leaving a message for you. And all of that chip cost was coming down and down and down. So we could see a point at which the technologies and costs would cross, particularly the costs would cross, and therefore where a product such as ultimately what we launched on the right could deliver more functionality at an equal or lower cost. So the product on the right had 3 levels of functionality, and the slide switch in blue could give different levels of functionality. So at one level, the infant level, it might just say moo. Whereas a mid-level complexity, the chip and the series of chips and circuit board on the inside of the item on the right could say, okay, that's the mid-level, so the cow says moo. And then ultimately, you might have the high level, as I recall, said, what kind of sound does the cow make? Pause, and then says, yes, it makes a moo sound at the oldest level. The point in all of this is looking at escalating costs of the product on the right, declining costs, on the left, declining costs of the product on the right. The point at which they crossed, we were able to launch a new product with increased functionality simply by looking at the trends. So as part of any new product process, it's important to understand what kind of research you're going to be doing. I am a firm believer in the lean startup, as well as lean product development, and certainly extensive work in customer discovery and product market fit. And we'll talk about that. One particular story I want to share with you this morning is a product market fit story that I was able to help this company in Camarillo, Interlink Electronics, develop this product called Go Speak. The company was a manufacturer of remote controls for digital projectors. So slide forward, slide back. They wanted to grow their business, but weren't sure how to do that. So I helped them identify that their customers were more than just digital projector manufacturers where they would OEM remote controls. They, in fact, were a company that provided product to people who present. And when we looked at the personas of who those people were, we were able to identify they were teachers, trainers, sales executive, road warriors, keynote speakers. Anybody who had a remote control in their hand were prospective customers. I then identified a trade group, the National Speakers Association, that were really at the heart of who those folks were, and then was able to do a focus group at their trade conference. From a dozen people in a room were professional speakers, presenters, and trainers. We came up with numerous new product ideas that would help them relieve anguish in their business and potentially improve revenue in their business as well. And what they shared with me was that one of their biggest anguishes was they'd get on the road and they would not have compatibility with the PA system that was in the room. And they would have all kinds of problems setting up with either the large boxes or small little boom boxes that weren't big enough. And they really wanted a product that could handle up to 200 people in a room, fold up like a laptop, fit in the overhead compartment of an airplane, come with a little lapel mic, and sell for under $1,000. And that's all we knew when I left the room. I went back to the CEO and I said, the market is asking for this. They're ready to buy this product tomorrow. And the CEO said, we don't know how to do this. We do infrared and radio frequency products. And I said, well, it doesn't matter. You've got a sales force who can sell this and a dealer network who will sell it as well. Let's find a way to make this happen. Ultimately, I found a strategic partner in Chicago that did the design, the development, and with their China factory, manufactured the product for a $35,000 initial investment in both engineering and capital equipment, which generated a multi-million-dollar revenue stream. This product has been in market for over 13 years now, on its 3rd generation of design, still generating revenue. All of that came because of customer discovery, product market fit, understanding the anguish in the market and being able to turn that into a product. So when you're out doing your customer discovery and product market fit, I suggest you look at, can you prioritize the feature set? You want to understand the customer's values, the benefits they're looking for, and ultimately the feature set. And maybe you could prioritize it at least in terms of must-haves and nice-to-haves. But ideally, if there's other ways to force rank or use other methods to get a clearer picture for your product development team as to the priorities of the feature set, I have an article. If you're interested, reach out to me. This article was published on the subject of managing the trade-offs in new product development, and it's really coming from being able to prioritize the feature set within new products. Also, within new product development, I recommend that you go out with an oral hypothesis before you start showing people a virtual or physical prototype. An oral hypothesis in this case would be an iron that may have a unique feature of some kind, and you'd go out and ask questions about would they be interested in a product that could do X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, you want to go out to the marketplace and test a virtual and/or physical prototype. But when you get to that stage, I put an asterisk here because you really need to have a non-disclosure agreement. The non-disclosure agreement will protect your intellectual property so that you can have those patents have force downstream. While you're doing the anguish studies and the oral hypotheses studies, generally speaking, that doesn't require a non-disclosure agreement because you're not describing in any detail what your product offers, but certainly you do when you're talking about a virtual or physical prototype. Also, when you're doing the market research, I want you to be clear about whether the product is regulated or really unregulated. So in certain consumer and industrial products which are unregulated, you can offer a product to the market that's an MVP, your minimum viable product, and make iterative changes as you go. Whereas regulated product, it's much more difficult to do so, whether the product is medical, such as a hypodermic product, as shown, or PPE, which also requires government certification to be able to sell a product like an N95 mask, and even some consumer products like infant toys and strollers, which are regulated by car seats, the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So just be aware that when you're doing the market research and you're looking for feature set and you're strategizing your rollout of product, if it's a regulated product, you can't do those running changes quickly like a software product or an unregulated piece of hardware. And you need to understand that doing the research and prioritizing your product innovation process and what features are going to be embedded. During marketability, I don't recommend you file a lot of patents because you don't really understand what the market values. But what I do recommend is that you look at your prior art. And this is just a cartoon that I picked up. Daddy, what's prior art? Dad says, depending on how good the patent attorney is. So depending on your budget and your patent attorney, you will do a deeper or less deep dive into what's out there based upon what you believe you have in mind for the market and the field of art that you're going to be in and how exactly you're going to reduce it to practice. But I do recommend you do some prior art studies during the early stages of marketability. So once you understand the market, who's out there, your personas, your go-to-market strategy, maybe the values, benefits, and feature set of what you plan to offer, it's time to move into technical feasibility, key number 2. Technical feasibility has to do with the product development, the manufacturing processes, and the product costing. We're going to talk about these. If your product that you have in mind will use a similar product development design, so for example, metalworking, gears, you're already using gears in the company that you're working with or the business you're in or the company you're trying to help get into business, that's great. If you're using metals, that's great, but if you're in a company that's manufacturing, for example, plastics, and you're trying to launch into their line metal-based products, that can be quite difficult to mix those kind of materials or mix those processes or mix those design methodologies. You want to be careful you don't end up in a situation where it takes 10 years and 10 physicists to be able to develop a product. You want to understand your design processes, your manufacturing processes, and your materials so that you can move from concept to cash in the shortest period of time. Same thing on the manufacturing side. What type of plant and equipment, machinery, factory labor, where will this production be made? All of these pre-existing sets of assets, if you will, need to be considered as you move forward in product development. And the further you are away from using similar manufacturing machinery, labor, and locations, the more difficult it will be to move from concept to cash. Let's talk about product costing. Often I get the question about, well, how am I going to know how much this product is going to cost out of a factory? Well, certainly you can look at competitive product. A rule of thumb, generally speaking, is that 20 to 25% of the retail price will be the factory cost. So if you see some type of competitive product, selling at $10, $2 to $2.50 is probably the factory cost, and that'll give you a good benchmark in terms of what your product cost is if you've got to be competitive. You can do guesstimates by estimating cost per pound of plastic, number of pounds of plastic in your computer-aided design model, same thing with metals, cost per screws, how many screws, et cetera, et cetera. So you can build up a guesstimate of a costed bill of materials. And then you can go out to contract manufacturers and get quotations. But again, you'll see the asterisk here because you want to do that under a non-disclosure where everything is labeled confidential information. And lastly, we're talking about how to protect your venture. So you understand there's a market. You can execute against the market at a cost low enough where everyone in the distribution channel makes the margins they expect. Now, how are you going to protect this venture? Well, generally speaking, it's with intellectual property, but there are other barriers that we're going to talk about as well. On the IP side, you have design patents, utility patents. You can file provisional patent applications, which can ultimately be converted into a non-provisional utility patent. You've got copyrights, trademark, trade dress, ultimately. You could have a trade secret, Coca-Cola, 7 Herbs and Spices of KFC. Even the PPE company was using trade secrets that they never disclosed in any of their patents, but they were manufacturing methodologies not disclosed to anyone, whereas a patent, you need to disclose the method of reduction to practice. How will you design and produce this item? And when you disclose this publicly in your patent, you're exchanging that for the protection of 20 years post-filing for your intellectual property. If you are so inclined, I recommend a couple great websites. First of all, uspto.gov. They have an incredible amount of information that's free. They have newsletters, webinars on patenting and trademarks. And my favorite search website is actually freepatentsonline.com, and you can set up alerts there with any Boolean search string criteria you want to get automatic alerts in any technology or competitive company that you want and have alerts sent to your mailbox. Other methods of protectability to protect your venture include branding and advertising. So if you've ever heard of the infomercial product, the Snuggie never had a patent. In fact, there was a product that was the precedent product from the Snuggie. It was called the Slanket. Nobody ever heard of a Slanket, both of which are just essentially towels with sleeves embedded or as some people say, a bathrobe turned backwards. But Snuggie spent a ton of money on branding and advertising. Being a first mover in the market is a way to protect, at least for a period of time, your position. And then supplier exclusivity. I was working with one doctor who had a product to help those with COPD breathe better. And what they were able to do was take the sensor that was embedded in the product, where that sensor was being sold in the automotive and the marine, the boating industry, and work to get an exclusivity agreement in the medical device industry so no one could sell that product. No one could sell a product with the sensor embedded in it in the medical device industry for a period of time based upon a commitment to a number of sales as well. So creating a supplier exclusivity arrangement will give you the opportunity to protect your venture as well, in addition to creating a blanket of intellectual property. So I hope this overview of the 3 keys to successful new products, that being marketability, technical feasibility, and protectability, is of value. My company, Pinnacle Product Innovation, offers market research, product development, manufacturing sourcing, and IP commercialization. Thank you very much for your time, and we will open it up for Q&A this morning.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was awesome. For those of you online, just a reminder that we do handle our Q&A through the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen in the center. We don't moderate the chat window, so go ahead and put your questions over into there and we can get started with. So Eric, you have 65 or so patents. Tell me a little bit about some of your favorites.
Wow, they range all over the map, from wheelchairs to commodes to toys, remote controls for digital projectors, kitchen gadget. I think probably the one that was most fun, that I love telling the story about, is a toy for Mattel toys. And we had a real difficult time being able to get around a patent that Hasbro had to launch a soft foam disc. And this was a Nickelodeon Rugrats toy. And it would shoot a series of discs across the room. The kids would all go chase the discs. Whoever had the most discs would then win the game. But the problem was the original concept model that came from the design team, which would shoot the discs, I tore apart to look at, and it said patented Hasbro and had the Hasbro patent number on it. So we had to be able to get around that patent. And we were in a brainstorming session one day thinking about all the different ways to launch a disc. Well, Mattel at the time owned Wham-O, who owned Frisbee. What makes a Frisbee fly? What makes a Frisbee fly is both forward and rotational simultaneous motion. Well, when I was a kid, we used to take bottle caps and snap them between our fingers, and the bottle caps would fly across the room. So here I am in the session doing brainstorming, and I put a foam disc up on my hand, and I took my fingers and I flicked the edge of that foam disc, and it glided beautifully across the entire conference room, about 20 feet. And I said, yes! That turned into a design that I developed to cock a leaf spring with an instantaneous release, boing, and simulated that twang. And that was the mechanism that shot the discs and that ultimately got patented.
Fantastic. And I like the story around that as well. Let's see. In your career, how many times, if any, have you had to go to court to defend your patents?
Oh, interesting. So I have not personally had to go to court, but coincidentally, something I haven't told you is that a few months ago, I started as a product design expert witness. So one of the other things that I've offered recently in my business is product design expert witness services. I'm currently an expert witness in a multi-district litigation class action product liability lawsuit against a Fortune 100 company in the PPE industry. So I haven't had my deposition or court appearance yet, but just finished my expert witness report last week, as a matter of fact.
Wow. What are some of the other things product-wise that you're seeing maybe happen from COVID or the impact of COVID that you see out in the future?
Well, there's certainly a lot going on in masks. So when I was working for the N95 mask manufacturing company in Culver City, mostly they were industrial applications. Second to that were medical, nurses, doctors, etc. Today, everybody's wearing a mask, almost everybody. And so masks now being ubiquitous in our life, more innovation is going around in this space of respiratory protection, whether it's fashion masks, masks with electromechanical filters, masks embedded with the UV light in a mask, more filtering, even with little power packs, just a wide variety of how we live in a world to create cleaner, safer air that we breathe and have that be normal in the way we live our lives. The innovation in respiratory protection has skyrocketed because of COVID.
What challenges have you seen to the innovation process due to this new normal of, Zoom meetings, remote collaboration? What have you seen in that area?
I think the idea of being able to do what I call digital design reviews. So for example, I was on a project where the tooling was being built in Asia, and I couldn't travel to Asia, but I needed to have my eyes on the steel to see the actual status of the molds. And so I worked with the Asian manufacturer to say, will you please take your laptop out into the tool room and hold it up to the tooling so I could see exactly where you are. I don't want to hear you tell me where your progress is. I want to see it. And never before was that normal to do that kind of work. But in today's world, it is normal, and it won't get the kind of, well, we don't do that, reaction that you might have got 10 or 15 years ago.
That's interesting, and I can imagine that it allows for troubleshooting of issues quicker instead of waiting for the whole product to be developed.
Or me to have to get on a plane.
Right. So much more can be hidden when you can't see things. I think maybe the transparency now will be an interesting shift in how we productize.
Yes, absolutely.
What are some of the challenges you've seen in just kind of interpersonal communications or with interpersonal communications?
Well, so I offer many services, one of which is project management. Mm-hmm. And project management is really all about communication, setting expectations, being clear. So I'm a general contractor. Somebody called me a harbor master. Somebody called me a product innovator therapist. So I serve all of those. And what I like to say is proper prior planning prevents poor performance. Mm-hmm. Having a plan, having expectations set, making sure even entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs, understand innovation is messy. It's 4 steps forward, 3 back, 2 to the left, 4 to the right, 1 more forward, 2 back. Getting those expectations set clear, creating a clear product requirement document, a clear plan of execution, realizing that that plan will not last its first battle, but it's at least something to have so that you can have that proper prior planning up front.
I love the proper prior planning. I work in program management operations. So it's having it put out there and be clear is so important. I feel like I'm the conductor of an orchestra sometimes.
Yes,
So
exactly, Christy,
I
you
get
get it.
I get how you feel about that role. Um, and then for let me see, how do I want to ask this question? We talked, there's so many steps in creating your product. Say we have an entrepreneur on here who is just starting out. You talked a little bit about non-disclosure agreement, but also what do you think the first step is to taking them from their own little space and their own little lab to getting their product started out to being productized?
Well, that's a great question. I find that about 70, maybe as much as 80% of the clients walking in my door haven't really done enough customer discovery and product market fit to justify the downstream R&D and intellectual property activity and expenses that are necessary. So often I say, well, you've got the cart before the horse. We really need to get the horse out in front of the cart. And in order to do that, we've got to get into the market and understand the deep knowledge of the user personas, the anguish, maybe even some ethnographic research where we're observing what's going on and what's what I call wrong with the world today. And then that will inform your set of insights into what the opportunity could be. From that, you can create your product spec with your must-have, nice-to-haves. Then you can move forward in development. When someone jumps ahead, I call it ready, fire, aim, it usually doesn't work out quite as well as they hoped it would.
How many of your 65 patents have been monetized? If not at all, what obstacles have you encountered?
So I will first say that over 90% of all patents in the United States don't make any money. And that is because, as CB Insights published a few years ago, CB Insights reported that 42% of all new startups that fail because they deliver something to the market that the market doesn't need. I try to help my clients beat those odds by doing the customer discovery and product market fit first. I will say over 80% of my patents have made money.
Fantastic.
It is quite, it's not just the 65, it's that a majority have made money. And they range from, remote controls to toys to wheelchairs to shower chairs to just a wide commodes, just a wide variety of product. But really understanding the market anguish and how to go from concept to cash in the shortest period of time will make the difference between turning that intellectual property into money versus a plaque on a wall collecting dust.
That's amazing, especially against that statistic. Wow. Our next question is, do you hire anthropologists to do your ethnographic research?
I don't as of yet. Most of my clients have done their own, but I'm always interested in being connected with those that do that kind of work. I can see more and more how important that is. I do have one expert market research associate who does both primary and secondary research. We haven't dug quite as deep as some significant ethnographic, just scratching the surface of it, but would definitely like to do more. So whoever that is, if you do that service, I'm interested in knowing who you are.
Wonderful. What are you excited about for the future coming up?
There is no limit to what's going on in the world. And I think as we look particularly, and I see my business starting to move a little bit towards IoT, right? The Internet of Things. This intersection of hardware, software, data, being able to understand the value of data. I was working with one prospective client recently on that intersection of hardware, software, data, predictive analytics in an enterprise manufacturing environment to be able to ensure that the factory can operate lights out without having any kind of stoppages due to maintenance problems. being able to predict mean time between failure of equipment and know to get in there and solve any potential shortages of product or outages of equipment well before it happens, you can only imagine how valuable that would be in PPE manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing, right? So that intersection of IoT, smart sensors on manufacturing equipment, for example, and being able to remotely monitor a factory anywhere in the world from a command center in Des Moines, Iowa, for example. We just don't know where that command center might be.
Our next question is, what are your recommended services and our tools to do market research? Typically, how much should be invested into it, being that it's a startup?
It varies all over the map, but most of my startups range between, I would say, $5,000 and $25,000 for an investment in market research. It depends on how savvy the team is to be able to do their own market research. So a lot of my work is coaching entrepreneurs to do the customer discovery and product market fit in a prescribed way, and I do this 3-step process. Step 1 is anguish discovery. Step 2 is oral hypothesis. Again, those 2 steps don't require a non-disclosure because you're not disclosing your new product. Step 3, under non-disclosure agreement, you'll have a virtual or physical prototype. And if my clients can do the research, I help them create the interview guide. They have 2 people out doing interviews. Of course, nowadays it's Zoom and you can do a recording, which is great. But if you're face-to-face, you want to have 1 person recording and 1 person asking questions. You can't do both simultaneously. But I recommend that you spend that time right up front laying the groundwork. One of my student groups at Cal State Northridge did over 100 interviews before they really secured what their offer was going to be.
After a project has completed all the steps you outlined, do you have experience or guidance on getting major funding to commercialize, and specifically for industrial manufacturing, non-high-tech projects? I feel like this is right in your sweet spot.
It is in my sweet spot, yes. So the answer is yes, and I've worked with, which was an incubator, an organization called Make in LA out in the Chatsworth area. And they recently shut down the incubator and they've re-embodied themselves as Make in LA Capital, where they focus on investing in hardware. And if anyone's interested in knowing more about that, please reach out to me and I'll connect you up with the founders of that organization.
Wonderful. And they've spoken for us before, so you'll probably be able to find a video out there as well. What communications methods do you have to enroll a client into taking your advice when it means they're going to have to spend money, like changing out equipment based on mean time to fail?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there.
Do you want me? So let's start with what communications methods that you use to enroll a client, especially when they're going to have to spend money.
Yeah, so
in the process.
What I found that works very well for me, I go through a process of an introductory call or Zoom so that we get to know, like, trust each other. We go under a non-disclosure agreement. Now we can do a deeper dive into who they are and what they're looking for and how I might be able to help them. Then I have them fill out a client intake form. And the client intake form makes them really think and commit in writing to describing the marketability, technical feasibility and protectability of their new venture, how they plan to fund their effort, and what they expect from me. And all that gets embedded in writing in the client intake form. So now, back to the subject of expectations, we're clear on where they are, where they want to go, and how I might be able to help them. Then I can lay out a proposal for how to move forward and what cost and timing would be involved in order to be able to move forward. So that's the first part of that question.
Great. And then when they have to change out equipment or things happen during the process, how do you mitigate the challenges or the risks, or have those really difficult conversations that none of us want to have, but we always need to have?
Yes. I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago, I started working with a client in Burbank. They're a manufacturer of ultraviolet light sterilizing equipment that goes into the air conditioning systems of hospitals and food factories. Well, in the last, since March, their sales have skyrocketed because their ultraviolet light panels that go in the air conditioning systems kill COVID-19. So now the question became, how do they change out their manufacturing to be able to keep up with production? So I looked at a number of things. It wasn't just changing out manufacturing, although we looked at automating equipment going from drilling one hole at a time to multi-gang drilling on automatic drilling stations and what the cost and implementation challenges were there. But fundamentally, they also had issues of what I call design for manufacturing. So instead of having to put in screws on this side, screws on this side, screws on this side, they had to follow methodologies of design for manufacturing where all the screws would come in this way. So it could be automated from a screwing perspective and nobody ever had to turn it this way, turn it this way, and turn it this way. That was a huge effort, and they really were not prepared to digest a design for manufacturing relook, not immediately. But the idea of changing from one drill hole at a time that cost them a few $100 to buy a drill press to maybe a few $1,000s to automatically multi-gang drill, that was more reasonable, and they could see a direct correlation and maybe an automated vacuum system so they didn't have a guy brushing the chips off the machine by hand.
It's a great story. That was the last of our questions. Did this bring up anything else that you want to share with us today?
Well, I can leave one other thing. I run the largest inventors meetup group in Los Angeles. It's called Inventors Mastermind SoCal. You can find our link by either going to Meetup and Googling Inventors Mastermind, or on my website, ericpaulrose.com. On the links page, you'll find Inventors Mastermind SoCal Meetup link. It's a free meetup to join, and since we are no longer meeting face-to-face and don't have any of those associated costs, everybody's welcome to join. There's a short questionnaire. All of our events are free as well. We cover everything from inventing, prototyping, manufacturing, pitching, licensing, promoting your new products.
Fantastic. Well, it's so great to hear about it. I don't think I knew about that. We did put your website into the chat window, so people, you can check it out there. Congratulations on your meetup. I love the innovation and inventor aspect of it. Thank you, Eric from Pinnacle Product Innovation, for being with us here today at Friday Coffee Meetup.
And a quick shout out to Adriana Torreson, who ultimately connected me all the way through you guys. Your member, Adriana. Thank you so much.
And we are also grateful for Adriana. She spoke with us a few months ago and did a fantastic presentation on product as well. So please go to our YouTube channel and check that out, or our podcast channel to check out that presentation as well. This will be posted a few weeks on those channels. I do want to let everybody know next week is Connect Week in Pasadena, and it's 7 days of innovation events across the city. So please go to connectpasadena.com to check out all the different events that will be happening. Friday Coffee Meetup, we will be having an event next week. It'll be a little surprise for you, but we are looking forward to seeing you there. We are thankful to everybody who's joined us today. This was our first live stream on LinkedIn, so thank you for joining us on LinkedIn as well. We will be having open networking now, so those of us who are here on the Zoom meeting, if you would like to stay on and get to know some of the other people who have joined the meetup today and ask maybe a few more further questions to Eric. Eric, can you stick around for a few minutes after? Wonderful. So if you would like to do open networking, go ahead and stick around. I'm going to stop the live stream and stop the recording, and then we will bring you over into the panelist pool so we can build community with one another. Thank you for joining us today. We all hope you stay safe and well. You can learn about our meetup at FridayCoffeeMeetup.com. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.